oh boy, this is going to be a complicated issue today. Hi, my name is Aaron and this is my show, Reeducation, and today I'm going to be talking about a subject that is very controversial, and there's no real delicate way to handle this, so I'm going to have to just jump right in. We're going to be talking about prostitution. More specifically, if it would exist in an anarcho-communist structured society. Now, before you make a judgment call on this, and before you click the dislike button and write a comment on how terrible I am for even bringing up the idea, let's try to walk through this from the history perspective of it and through along to the modern day and see if we can come to a conclusion together on if such a thing could or even would exist. And of course, I'm going to withhold my judgment until the end as well. So, prostitution. Throughout human civilization, and actually throughout natural evolution, we have seen a form of prostitution. To be more specific, it would be a sex trade or sex work. What you see in African bonobos and in a lot of different apes and primates is that they actually will trade sexual favors for better food. If one ape is able to find the most scrumptious bananas, it's a bad example, but you know what I'm trying to say, and they are willing to give it up to another ape for sexual favors, you just created a sex trade. You just created an industry based around giving sex for food. This is basically something that has happened throughout time, throughout all of history, and it's not something that can ever really be completely eliminated. Of course, we hear often that sex work is probably the oldest industry, and I agree with this, but the problem that a lot of people have is that we tie the idea of sex work, specifically in the past, to kind of this puritanical, very hyper-religious idea of it being taboo or being very unsavory, something that only the most disgusting people would want to engage in, and most of the time, it would be coercive. It would be forcing a woman to do, or a man to do something that they don't necessarily want to do, because they would either starve if they didn't, or they would be in some sort of situation where their health and well-being would be in jeopardy for them not doing that act. And of course, moving along further into the future, we have the same sort of problems arising with our modern version, our modern understanding of toxic masculinity. We see prostitution and sex work and the sex trade as being, as I said before, 100% coercive industry, something that people are forced into because of economics, because of certain power dynamics, and of course, because of patriarchal influences. It's not even a question to say that toxic masculinity is one thing that has been not only damaging, but possibly completely destructive to the human civilization. And this is another form in which it has taken something that is inherently not a bad thing, a very natural thing, and corrupted it and made it into something terrible, something that is looked at as being unsavory or disgusting. The fact of the matter is that sex work, the sex trade, any kind of industry that involves that, is basically something that arises because of the human desire for compassion. A lot of people have this problem where they conflate sex, love, and intimacy all into one thing, and I assure you that it is separate things. They are three equally important needs that we have as human beings. We need to have intimacy. We need to have love. And just like everything else, we need to have sex. When we're talking about the sex industry, too, a lot of the time, we're not talking about an industry where it is 100% about having sex. We're talking about an industry that serves several different needs. Of course, the sexual aspect is there, but a lot of the time, you're talking about an industry that deals with people's emotions, their physical desires. You're not going to find love in a prostitute, but you are going to be able to find physical intimacy. That is something apart from love, apart from sex, that you can find in that industry. Should we be depriving people of sexual intimacy, of physical relationships? 20% of the American population has seen an escort or a prostitute at least once in their lives. That's an incredibly large amount of people. You're basically taking those people and telling them that they are no longer going to be able to have those sexual needs fulfilled in an anarcho-communist structured society. And that says to me that we have about 20% of the people that just won't join our revolution. And I don't think that that's any way to get an actual revolution done. But that obviously doesn't take into consideration that we cannot force people to have sex with anybody else that they don't want. Obviously, under anarchy, we have full body autonomy. It's not something that we can force somebody to do or not to do. And if somebody wants to trade sex for a favor like having their fence fixed, who are we to tell them that they can't do it? If Tim needs his house painted and he happens to be very good at giving blowjobs, and John happens to be very good at painting and is in need of a blowjob, then I don't see why that physical interaction can't go on. That sounds to me like a mutually beneficial agreement between two consenting people. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about consenting people. And we shouldn't be looking at sex work as being some sort of monolith, some sort of thing that is apart from regular work. It's something that is basically as natural as anything else in the world. The idea is that you never coerce or force anybody to do something that they don't want to do. But let's take a look at something other than prostitution. Let's take a look at being a doctor. Now, you're not going to force any doctor in your community to perform a surgery on somebody. Of course, that would seem barbaric. The doctor would inevitably want to do a surgery on them because that's why they became a doctor. But over and above that, there's an agreement that you have between workers in the community and the community itself. And those workers have agreed to perform a certain job. Being a doctor or being an artist or being a prostitute are all different forms of labor. They should not be looked at as something that are apart from each other. You don't need any coercion. You don't need any force to make somebody want to be in the sex industry. A lot of people do it because they enjoy doing it. That's how a lot of porn ends up existing. That's how cam models, for the most part, end up existing. That is basically one of the last forms of a cottage industry that we have in the world right now, especially here in Canada, since we made marijuana legal. When you're a cam model, to a certain extent, you, for the most part, own and control the means of your own production. You get to choose what you make, how you make it, when you make it, and what to do with the profits. That's kind of like communism. I mean, now you do have to pay a certain surplus to be able to use the service, the website to be able to do it, but that's just the world that we live in. That's capitalism, just sneaking its dirty little ugly head into every sort of orifice that we can possibly find. Maybe not the best choice of words. Very much like being a doctor, if you wanted to be a professional escort, then you would sign up and become part of the professional escort union. You would have representation. You would work a certain amount of hours for the community every week. And out of that, you would get from the community what you needed. And anything over and above that amount of labor that you gave to the community, you'd get to decide what you did with it yourself. You get to choose what you produce, when to produce, how to produce, and what to do with the profits. We shouldn't be looking at sex and sex work and prostitution as this thing apart from our daily lives. That's basically the ideas that Puritanism and toxic masculinity have embedded into our brains the entire time, our entire lives. We're being told that sex is some kind of taboo and it's terrible and you shouldn't want to do it and you should be ashamed of your body and you should be ashamed of everything. We look at sex work as though we should treat it separate from every other industry, as though it's something that's special or different or unique in some way, something that we should keep a taboo on and that we shouldn't think of as just being labor. But sex work is work. It's just another form, another thing that we desire, that we need, that we want, and that we can have fulfilled by somebody else. And I'm saving this part for the end because I think that this is the most important, and I think that this is where I'm going to get the most blowback. Now, I'm sure that a lot of people out there think that I'm just saying all of this and pulling it out of my ass. But I'm not. I'm saying all this because it comes from a place of pure understanding. I was involved in the sex work industry for the better part of the last decade in various forms. I'm not ashamed of that. I shouldn't be ashamed of that. I think that it's fantastic, and I think that it's just as viable of an industry as anything else. And I think that people that work in that industry are strong, passionate, and extremely caring and compassionate people that want to help others. They just tend to want to do it for a fee. That's not bad. That's something that is inherent to the world, to the civilization, to the society that we live in. And if we completely eliminated money, if we completely eliminated profit, there would still be a certain percentage of people out there that would choose to do that as their job. Some people like it. It's fun sometimes. A lot of the time it's not. But that's not necessarily why you get into it. Sometimes it's the best possible option, and sometimes you're a professional and you're really good at it. And it's something that brings you joy. Just like painting a painting or being a doctor, being a professional surgeon. It's all labor, it's all work, and it's all consensual. It's all something that somebody chooses to do. Now, of course, coercion is absolutely unacceptable. Nobody should ever be forced to do something they don't want to do. And if a doctor didn't want to operate on somebody, that's up to them. Of course it is. Now, if you choose to be a doctor, though, in an anarcho-communist structured society, and you consistently say, hey, I don't want to perform surgeries, then the community would probably get together and say, well, you kind of agreed to be the doctor, but if you don't want to do doctor stuff, then I guess we'll probably give you a different job. That's a possibility. But if you choose to be a sex worker, if you choose to be a doctor, if you choose to be a plumber, then you get to do that job. That's the job that you chose. That's the industry that you wanted to be a part of. That's your choice. And it's not something that somebody else can force you to do. And it's not something that the community can tell you to do. We're not going to socialize cock and pussy. You get to decide what you do with those yourself. My name is Aaron. This is my show, Reeducation. And my judgment on this is I'm not touching it. And you can fight about that shit in the comments section below. I'm not touching this one with a 100-foot pole. At least that's the way I look at it. My name is Aaron. This is my show, Reeducation. Or at least it was. Who's to say what happens when I release this video? Thanks for watching.